Hi everyone, my name is Sven Riva. I'm a PhD student in law at the University of Neuchâtel in Switzerland and currently a visiting student researcher at Stanford University in California. I'm pleased to be here today with Professor Florence Guillaume to discuss decentralized autonomous organizations, also called DAOs. We'll talk about the leading role that the Hague Conference on Private International Law could have to bring more legal certainty to the crypto economy by adopting an instrument with rules of private international law that would be applicable to DAOs.
Hi everyone, my name is Florence Guillaume. I'm a professor of private international law at the University of Neuchâtel in Switzerland. And I'm very happy to be here tonight or today with you and with Sven to speak about DAOs.
Okay, so let's start with the notion of a DAO. To do this, we can compare DAOs to traditional centralized companies. So with a traditional company, you can see that it's a hierarchical organization. You have some employees, you have the management, and you have the CEO. And in some forms of companies, like a corporation, you also have outside investors. And the law defines all the relationships between those people and the relationship between those people and the company. Now, if we look at a decentralized autonomous organization, or DAO, so DAOs in their purest form are flat organization. There's no hierarchy. There's no specific person that stands out and that can specifically represent the DAO. And in a DAO, all the relationships between the members or between the members and the DAO are defined in the DAO's code. So it's not defined in a law. And all of this is defined in what we call smart contracts. And so if there are two types of DAOs that we can define, first of all, they're regulated DAOs. So regulated DAOs are DAOs that have been incorporated according to a law. Some states, for example, in the United States, the state of Tennessee, the state of Wyoming, and Vermont have enacted laws that allow the incorporation of DAOs. And so those DAOs are linked to those states, and they qualify as companies. And on the other hand, we have maverick DAOs, which are the vast majority of DAOs. They are not constituted according to a law, and because of this, they are really intrinsically international organizations, and their legal qualification is really uncertain. So there are a few elements that make DAOs intrinsically international companies or organizations. First of all, DAOs exist on the blockchain, which is an international network. So since it really works and lives on the blockchain, we can really say that a DAO is an international organization. And also the members of the DAO can be residents from different states. DAOs in their purest form, they don't discriminate on who can join the DAO. It's really open to all. And also it is hard to know who is in the DAO. Anybody from anywhere in the world can join a DAO, and it's hard to identify who those specific members are. So in the end, it is really an international organization. And DAOs, they also bring questions of private international law. So if we look at regulated DAOs, the main question is going to be, can those new forms of companies be recognized in other states? And if we look at maverick DAOs, the legal question will be, do those organizations have a legal existence in state jurisdictions? So all those legal uncertainties could be clarified by a Hague Convention on DAOs. So that's what we're going to explore today.
So the first point that we are going to discuss is the DAO qualification. It's a very important issue to qualify DAOs. When we examine the legal situation of DAOs, a parallel can be drawn with trusts. The current situation of DAOs is very similar to that of trusts. At the time the Trust Convention was negotiated, very few states had a legal regime for trusts. and states unfamiliar with trust were confused about this new institution and had great difficulty integrating it into their legal order. The difficulty was all the greater because the trust is multiform and multipurpose, and it is therefore difficult to grasp its specific features. For this reason, the Trust Convention begins by establishing the characteristic elements of a trust in order to adopt an autonomous notion of trust specific to the Convention. If we wish to make an international instrument applicable to DAOs with rules of private international law, the same approach should be adopted. The first objective is therefore to identify the essential elements that are common to the different types of DAOs in order to define an autonomous notion of DAO. This will allow to have a universally accepted notion of DAO. The definition of DAO is an important step given the diversity of the forms and purposes of DAOs and the novelty of the institution. So now, Sven, what are the key elements that characterize the DAOs?
Yes, so if we look at existing DAOs, we can really take out a few elements. So the first element is that a DAO is a community of members. And those members, they have a common purpose, and they act in the digital environment of the blockchain. A second element is that DAOs work on blockchain technology. So they used distributed ledger technology and smart contracts to function. Another element would be distributed governance. In DAOs, really in their purest form, there's no one member that has the power over the organization. It's really a distributed governance between all the members of the community. And then we can ask ourselves about autonomy, because decentralized autonomous organization. Is this a qualifying element? You have two sets of autonomy. Autonomy as an autonomous organization where all the I would say the processes in the organization are automatized, or autonomy from a state, that a DAO can exist without the help from the state, and so yes, that it would be a good question to know if that's a defining element of a DAO. And also another one would be, does the DAO's assets, are they parts of the members' assets, or are they not part of the members' assets? What we've seen is that DAOs really have their own set of assets, crypto assets, or like crypto currencies, or also NFTs. And coming back to the notion of a DAO, we can also see that even in the United States, where you have state laws and federal laws, there's no common definition. So, for example, in Wyoming, a DAO is just a limited liability company that identifies as a DAO. And at the federal level, in the Responsible Financial Innovation Act, we can see that you have a few elements that are key. DAOs, they work on smart contracts, they have distributed governance, and they must be properly incorporated. Those are the three defining elements of a DAO. So now we're going to talk about the scope of a convention, of a DAO convention.
Thank you, Sven. So in any case, the notion of DAO must be defined broadly enough to include all types of DAOs, whether they are regulated by the law of state or not. The new instrument would only be truly useful if it includes all types of DAOs, regardless of whether they are constituted under the law of a state. Indeed, it is mainly the legal regime of maverick DAOs that needs to be clarified. And the notion of DAO that will be defined in the new instrument would be very useful to identify DAOs that will enter into the notion of DAO. But the notion of DAO stated in this instrument may also be useful to serve as a guide to assist those states that wish to integrate DAOs as a new form of legal entity into their legal order. A DAO that has the basic elements defined in the international instrument will indeed be able to enter into the scope of application of this instrument and benefit from the legal certainty offered by the rules of private international law that will be provided for in the convention. So once the notion of DAO is established, it will then be possible to define the private international law rules applicable to DAOs under the new instrument. To do this, we can draw inspiration from two Hague conventions, the Trust Convention and the Convention on the Recognition of the Legal Personality of Companies. Both conventions contain two types of rules. First, rules to determine the law applicable to the trust or the company. And second, rules to ensure the recognition of the legal existence of the trust or company in all contracting states. In our opinion, the most important issue concerning DAOs is the recognition of their legal existence in national legal orders. A new private international law instrument applicable to DAOs must therefore, first of all, settle the question of the recognition of DAOs. On this subject, it must be said that no state has yet adopted specific private international law rules governing the recognition of DAOs. Even in the few states that have passed a DAO law, there is no private international law rule applicable to DAOs incorporated in other states. Based on the model of the Convention on the Recognition of Companies and the Trust Convention, the DAO Convention could set a basic rule. A DAO must be recognized in the contracting states if it has been validly constituted under the law governing it. Furthermore, the recognition of a DAO must imply some legal effect. If we apply this system to DAOs, we must first determine the law applicable to the DAO. In determining the law applicable to a DAO, one must distinguish between three types of DAOs. First, DAOs that are regulated by state law, such as the DAO incorporated in the US state of Wyoming. Second, DAOs that are not regulated by state law, the so-called maverick DAOs. Among the maverick DAOs, another distinction can be made between those that are regulated only by their code, on the one hand, and those that are regulated by a body of non-state rules, on the other hand. If we look at the regulated DAOs, they are companies created under a state law. It is therefore easy to identify the applicable law, which is the law under which the DAO has been incorporated, constituted, or organized. As for maverick DAOs, the situation is quite different because they are not incorporated, constituted, or organized under a national rule of law. Quite the opposite, their members chose not to subject the DAO to a state law. We can speak in this regard of a choice of no law. If a DAO convention was to be drafted, we should ask ourselves whether the applicable law of a DAO could be its code. If we follow this approach, an entity that is a DAO under the convention, that is constituted according to its code, would be recognized in the contracting states. There is a second case of a maverick DAO that is not regulated by a state law. One could indeed imagine that a DAO is regulated by rules of law that are generally accepted on an international, supranational, or regional level. Such rules of law do not yet exist but may be adopted in the future. For example, the model law drafted by the COALA expert group defines a legal framework for DAOs. This would be a good option to let maverick DAOs organized according to such a non-state rules to benefit also from the rules stated in the DAO convention. The recognition of the DAO would then be possible if it is validly constituted according to rules of law generally accepted on a suprastate level. So now that we have seen how to determine the law applicable to a DAO, we are going to speak about the recognition of DAOs.
Yes. So the first feature that a Hague DAO convention would have would be to have the automatic recognition of DAOs that are validly incorporated, constituted, or organized under a state law, under a regime defined by the founders in the DAO's code, or a body of legal rules adopted in an international, supranational, or regional level. So this notion of automatic recognition would be really, really important. Another feature in a Hague DAO convention would be the recognition of the DAO's legal personality and the recognition of limited liability of the members. So for the legal personality, what that mean would be that the DAO would be able to sue and be sued. So for example, if the DAO has if there's a breach of contract, the DAO would need to be able to sue the contracting party, or vice versa. A contracting party would have to be able to sue the DAO. Also, it would grant DAOs the possibility to have their own property. So that means that the DAO's estate is its own estate and not its members' estate. And it would allow also DAOs to enter into contracts and other legal acts. So that would grant legal existence to contracts that DAO enter into. So, for example, if a DAO has to hire an employee in its activities, that would grant legal recognition, a legal scope to that contract, because DAOs are really used just as any other type of company. They're used in the crypto economy, and they contract with other parties, and they hire people. So it is really important that all those legal elements are clarified and have a legal scope. And the second point, the limited liability of the members, is also, we know that it would be a stretch for DAO for states to recognize the limited liability of all DAOs, but we believe it would be a really important thing, a really important feature of a Hague DAO convention, so that DAOs could really be used as a legal vehicle for business. And the recognition of legal personality and limited liability, those are features of substantive law that would be incorporated into a private international law instrument. But this has already been done with the Trust Convention, where the Hague Trust Convention recognizes that the trustee's estate is separated from the trust. Okay, well, there is all the elements about the about a DAO, Hague DAO convention. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll let Florence give the final words.
Thank you, Sven. So in conclusion, we can say that the adoption of a new private international law instrument for DAOs would be very useful to provide legal certainty for international relations that are currently very poorly regulated and present many risks for users. While drawing on existing rules for other types of institutions, such as companies or trusts, a new approach is needed that is adapted to the specificities of DAOs. This includes recognizing that a DAO may have a legal existence that has not been granted by a national law. In any case, it is very important that the rules of a Hague Convention for the recognition of DAOs meet the expectations of the users of this type of entity. So we have come now to the end of our presentation. We hope it has given you a better understanding of the legal issues involved in adopting private international rules applicable to DAOs. We thank you very much for listening to us. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.